An interesting development today regarding Russia, China, and India is turning into something big enough that the Western media can't even wrap their head around it. My next guest has brought it to our attention and calls it the most dangerous threat facing the U.S. He's one of the few analysts out in front of this concern. Please welcome to the show, Keith Fitz-Gerald. Keith, give us your best review about why this is important, what it is and why it's important.
Okay, so here's the deal, Scott. This is going unseen and unrecognized by Western politicians, business leaders, and bankers, including our own Fed. It is at once the single biggest, largest, most comprehensive threat that the United States has ever faced. China has long wanted to unseat the United States dollar, but now moving into the digital yuan and establishing bilateral trade agreements around the world, they are using the Ukraine situation to their advantage to negotiate directly with other countries for payment in yuan. Most of global trade is denominated in dollars. If that happens, it radically changes our financial world. I think it takes place within the next 5 to 10 years max.
Okay, so what would the changes look like, just for our viewers?
The dollar would get weaker, inflation would get worse, our trade would get more difficult, the dollar would no longer be the hegemon that it is. We'd have to have unprecedented volatility in our financial system. New York Stock Exchange becomes at risk, global investment shifts to China. I mean, the list is very long and very dark, which is why we have every interest in protecting this now.
It seems like they've hit the fast forward button on it because Putin said today he only is going to take rubles for oil.
Well, not only that, but he's got India negotiating with Russia for a payment mechanism that potentially is bilateral and outside the United States global payment system or even the SWIFT network. China is looking to unseat this, stack the deck at the yuan. So again, this is very, very serious. And the West cannot even understand that this game is being played. China's been working on a digital version of their currency since 2014, Scott. We're still getting out of the starting gate.
Right. And so just one more time, because again, I think that this is so big, our Western media can't really get their head around it. And you've got a great handle on it, and you explain it very simply. But just so our viewers know, reinforce it one more time about what this means and what it means to them, and what would be the ongoing events.
What it means is that when our government wants to make a financial decision, they potentially have to call Beijing because that's where the global trade is going to be centered.
That's the best way you could put it. So we're going to be losing control of the world's reserve currency, which is the dollar, and we might be beholden to somebody else. And they're already starting to make headway that way. And like you said today, that we've got China and Russia and India now all getting together on this, and that could be just the beginning, right?
Yes, and here's the thing, though. Again, in the United States, we have this tremendous fascination with the instant. You know, if you ask a United States executive for long-term planning, they're going to tell you what's happening next week. If you ask a Chinese executive what long-term planning look like, I have personally seen 100-year business plans in China. They're not playing for next week or next month. They're playing 100 years from now. So these moves, this is today the latest in a long series of moves that I've been tracking for a decade. It is also, not coincidentally, the most visible, and they're doing it because they perceive an opportunity in Ukraine and all the global chaos.
All right, now this might be the next dumbest question of the afternoon, but we're not picking up on it here. Is it A, because like I said, they don't understand it, or B, is there some sort of nefarious thing happening out there that they're not wanting to bring it up?
I don't think it's either of those, frankly, Scott. I think that nobody inside the Beltway, or let me rephrase that, very few people inside the Beltway understand the stakes. They're more worried about reelecting themselves and squabbling with each other across the aisle than they are in protecting America and the interest and the people who sent them there.
And so when and if this takes place, you said one of the biggest things that will happen is more inflation than we have now, correct?
Potentially, yes, particularly if the Fed doesn't wake up and understand what's going on with the dollar. Because the reason why we can control the dollar and run the budgets that we do is because the dollar is largely the global trade mechanism. So this is like going to McDonald's. You know, you have a relative control and relationship with your hamburger and your fries because it's paid for in dollars. But all of a sudden, if they start pricing stuff in Chinese yuan, your dollar becomes relatively moot. They can turn around and ask you to pay more simply because they own the currency.
Right. So I'm going to have to sum that up by saying we're going to go from the dog wagging its tail to being the tail that's being wagged by the dog.
I got you one better. The Dragon is coming to lunch on Tuesday. The only decision our government has to make is if you want to be at the table or on the menu.
And that's even better. So I'm glad that we brought that up. That's a really, really important thing. And I think that for our viewers, we've simplified it enough that they can get their head around it. And it's not just them. I do believe that there's a lot of folks out there that don't understand what losing that reserve currency would be. And I've seen that firsthand where we've been threatened again. I said it in the monologue. When I lived in London, there was going to be the quote unquote, the euro was going to be the new currency. And that really didn't pan out. And obviously, business is still conducted around the world basically in English, which has also been a big help to that currency, I think. Go ahead.
Well, it has. And here's the silver lining in all this, right? Is everybody starts talking about smaller companies. Those are the ones that are going to do your portfolio in without you knowing it. But if you're sticking with large global players that can influence brand behavior, that are hotly in demand in those countries that are rapidly trying to unseat the dollar, this is the Apples of the world, the Microsofts of the world, this is the healthcare companies of the world. That's where you're actually, as an investor, going to stay in the game rather than being kicked out of it.
I tell you what, that is the gold nugget we're giving everybody going home with this afternoon. I really appreciate that, Keith. I'm so glad you brought it up, and I'm so glad we were the opportunity to bring it up and let everybody know about it. All right. Thank you very much, Keith. Have a great weekend. He's coming to us from Seattle.
Hi, it's Keith here. Thanks for checking out today's highlight clip. What'd you think? Did I make sense? Is there something you'd like to add? Make sure you leave a comment down below, and of course, click subscribe to keep up right here on YouTube, or sign up for the email newsletter at the link below. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram for my real-time thoughts on markets, analysis, and a whole lot more.